France and Europe are coming to terms with the possibility of the far right gaining power in one of the EU's core members. Marine Le Pen's National Rally Party has taken the largest share of the vote in the weekend's first round of voting in parliamentary elections, with 33% in the first round. Now, President Macron's centrists, seen here in yellow, they trailed in third with just 20%, and they came behind a left-wing alliance that polled 28% of the vote. The president's calling on voters to prevent the far right from winning a governing majority in next Sunday's decisive final round.
A crushing victory in the first round of voting for the far-right National Rally Party. A victory that has brought nationalist, Eurosceptic and anti-immigrant politics very close to power for the first time.
I think it's the people's revenge on the elites who have lied to the French people for over 40 years. And I hope that Marine Le Pen, together with Jordan Bardella, will lift France up so that French values can finally return and we can continue to hope for a better future.
I had tears in my eyes because I've been hoping for this for years. I'm hoping now we'll get the country back on its feet. We've got to do something.
The National Rally is pinning its hopes on another spectacular victory in Sunday's runoff.
My ambition is to win an absolute majority on Sunday. I call on the French people to remain mobilised and, of course, I intend to form a government of national unity on the basis of this absolute majority.
Thousands of people in France have protested the party's win. Its extremist views have long been considered taboo. The election results have left many people shaken.
When the results came in, I was completely shocked. It's totally overwhelming to think that a party that preaches hatred has gained so many votes.
The results are a major setback for President Emmanuel Macron's centrist Renaissance Party. The president had called a snap election, hoping that the far right's victory in recent European Parliament elections would not be repeated. The first round has been a big win for the National Rally, but just how big will only become clear after the second round of voting.
More on this from Cole Stangler. He's a freelance journalist. His latest book is called Paris is Not Dead: Surviving Hyper-Gentrification in the City of Light. He joins us from Marseille. Welcome to DW. Was Sunday's vote a positive endorsement of Marine Le Pen's National Rally, or just a rejection, a protest vote against the president?
Well, thanks for having me. I think at this point, it's quite clear that we've kind of surpassed the era of protest votes. The National Rally has a very large base, and that base mobilized in the vote on Sunday. Only to look at the participation figures. I think there's this kind of sense, especially on the left, that higher turnout would only benefit the left, that the far right does not do well in high turnout elections. But actually what we saw on Sunday is that you had the highest turnout since 1997 in a context of declining turnout. So people went out and voted, and they voted for the far right. The far right has a base that's growing, and they vote. So no, I think we're at this point really beyond a protest vote. We're talking about a share of the electorate that's quite large, that shares common views about the economy, and perhaps most importantly, shares common views about immigration and French identity. That's really the kind of cement that brings together this diverse coalition.
And so what we have is something like 2/3 of voters there are voting for a far left and far right. So the extremes have gathered on both sides have gathered the majority. What sort of horse trading is likely to be going on ahead of Sunday's second vote as Macron centrists and the leftist alliance that came second, as they call on voters to stop the far right?
Yeah, I think it's important just to stress that there are fundamental differences between we've heard this term about the extremes, but between the far right and then the left bloc. But certainly right now we've entered a phase where very quickly after those results started to come in on Sunday night, we saw essentially left-wing parties, so this broad coalition called the New Popular Front, which is a nod to the 1936 Popular Front that helped prevent the far right from winning power in France, we saw very quickly all the parties in this coalition call for withdrawing from races in which their candidate finished in third and in which the National Rally candidate finished in first. So effectively giving support to the Macronist candidate in the second round against the far right. And again, that second round is taking place next Sunday. So this is kind of this idea of the Republican front that many people thought was dead, this idea of voters joining together to stop the far right from winning. And then we've also seen, to some extent, Macronist candidates also withdrawing from these races in which they're qualified in third position. So that's the kind of horse trading that we're seeing going on. It's you have candidates really from both camps stepping aside in the hopes that the candidate best positioned to defeat the far right is able to do so. And that's really the best chance that the left and then the Macronists have if their goal is to prevent far right from winning an absolute majority, because there are 577 seats. All the far right needs to do is get 289, and they have an absolute majority at that point.
OK, so paint us a picture then of this previously unthinkable situation in which the National Rally wins an absolute majority next week. What's likely to change in France? What would we notice from outside and perhaps from inside?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's important to stress again, this is, it's far from decided. We have a whole other election coming up on Sunday. But if you look at the RN's program, on economic questions, they're somewhat unclear. First, they wanted to repeal Macron's retirement reform. Now they're maybe taking a second look at it. The most clear they are is when it comes to questions of immigration. So to give you a few examples, one, they want to repeal France's long-standing tradition of birthright citizenship. This idea that if you're born on French soil, even if your parents are foreigners, are both foreign, you can eventually obtain French nationality. The National Rally wants to repeal this tradition, which in some ways goes all the way back to the 16th century with some exceptions. Not even the Vichy regime in World War II did that. So repealing this tradition of birthright citizenship, ramping up deportations of undocumented immigrants, that's also in their program. And then finally, it's created quite a lot of controversy here in France. And opposition, frankly, is they're vowing to limit certain jobs in France, public service jobs, to non-dual citizens. So if you're a dual citizen in France, you wouldn't be able to have certain jobs. And again, this is a radical break with what we call the Republican tradition in France. So on the immigration questions and national questions, it's really quite clear what they want to do.
OK, so given that the National Rally is such an anti-immigrant party, and so many people are voting for them unashamedly, what is it about migration at the moment in France that makes this party seem so attractive?
Well, this is a question that's been part of the public debate in France for decades now. Really started ramping up in the 1970s when the economy started to slow down with the economic crisis. So it's been in kind of the public eye. Immigration has slightly increased since then, but the numbers are need to be put into context, not these enormous waves that you hear the RN talking about. Part of it is, I think, the ongoing economic issues that can sort of, according to a lot of social scientists, kind of activate the sort of xenophobic anti-immigrant sentiment. I think that's part of it. I think another factor you have to look at really what's changed in the last few years in France. And it can be a little bit kind of navel-gazing to talk about the media, but it's very important. You have an increasingly aggressive conservative media infrastructure that has grown in France, led by the billionaire Vincent Bolloré. And you had a real shift in kind of the media discourse and the conversation. And also Macron's party has followed suit as well. So in addition to the media, the Macronist government has tried to kind of pick and choose certain topics, immigration, security, and in particular immigration, to sort of show that they too are serious about this question. So they had quite a controversial immigration law passed by Macron that didn't actually give a boost to Macron in the polls. On the contrary, it actually showed to the French public that, well, the National Rally is sort of winning the battle here of ideas. And I think all of that has played into their favor.
Good talking to you. Thank you so much for walking us through that. Cole Stangler, freelance journalist and author. Thank you. Let's see if Gesine Weber can help us make sense of this. She's a researcher and analyst focusing on European affairs and security and defence issues. Welcome to DW. Yesterday's turnout, the biggest for nearly 30 years, with nearly two-thirds voting for the far right or the far left. So explain this to us. Is France voting for radical policies or just voting against the president?
Thank you so much for having me. I think it is indeed much more the second case that the vote was such or similar to the European elections, by the way, that just took place a few weeks ago against Emmanuel Macron. We see that the French are extremely dissatisfied with his policy and that his approach and initial endeavor to basically create a political force in the center to weaken the fringes of the political center has exactly not worked out. And I think it is also important to understand that in the French political context, many do not see the Rassemblement National as an extremist party anymore because of the de-diabolization campaign that Marine LePen has been running for decades. But yes, certainly the French political spectrum is widening and is being strengthened at the left and at the right, including at the extreme left and the extreme right.
Let's just pick up that point you made there about Marine Le Pen's, was it de-diabolization of her party? Are we to take this that this is a genuine change of her party's policies, or is this just window dressing to get elected?
In fact, it is window dressing and sugarcoating the policies that they want to adapt. So this idea of what is called de-diabolization in French is really to, if you want to put it like that, take the devil out of it and make it much more acceptable for a broader alliance or for a broader base of voters, which we see, for example, on Russia and Ukraine as well, where at one point the critical or the Russia-friendly points suddenly disappeared from the website of the Rassemblement National when Macron called for the snap elections. So the idea is really to suggest a far-right policy that will be very tough, for example, on immigration, that is very anti-European and all that, but that comes in a rhetoric that is acceptable for people who, in general, would potentially vote for a centre-right party.
Right. A quick word, then, about the wider picture. Europe's right-wing parties do seem to be undergoing something of a surge in popularity. How likely are they to coordinate their actions in the European Parliament, for example? Will they work together?
So, in general, in the European Parliament, it still remains to be seen in how far the far-right forces really coordinate. I think it is important to understand that although we saw really a surge of far-right parties, particularly in France, but also in Germany in the EU elections, that overall the center has held in the European Parliament. And at the moment, it doesn't look like there is going to be a far-right coalition also emerging in the European Parliament. So, of course, we have to see how that plays out on different issues that will be voted in the European Parliament. But in general, I would say that I'm more optimistic about the European Parliament to have a center that holds and supports pro-European policies.
Thank you so much for guiding us through that so clearly. Gesine Weber, political analyst.